the combined worship service for Trinity and Fort Yuma United Methodist Churches. I'm Katie Fuchs, an ordained deacon and staff member at Trinity, and it is a pleasure to be worshiping with you. I want to extend a special welcome to those who are worshiping with us for the first time. I hope you're blessed by your time with us. This week, Pastor Bob is focusing on his continuing pastoral education. We're delighted he's taking this opportunity and look forward to his return to presence with us in worship next Sunday. It is a joy to worship together in spirit, even as we are physically apart, to know that on this day we join with our beloved friends from Trinity and new friends yet unmet in Yuma and around the world.
To be praised, so shall I be saved from my enemies. I will call upon the Lord. The Lord liveth, and blessed be the rock, and let the God of my salvation be exalted. The Lord liveth, and blessed be the rock, and let the God of my salvation be exalted.
Hear a just cause, O Lord, attend to my cry. Give ear to my prayer from lips free of deceit. From you let my vindication come. Let your eyes see the right.
If you try my heart, if you visit me by night, if you test me, you will find no wickedness in me. My mouth does not transgress. As for what others do, by the word of your lips, I have avoided the ways of the violent.
My steps have held fast to your paths. My feet have not slipped. I call upon you, for you will answer me, O God. Incline your ear to me, hear my words.
Wondrously show your steadfast love, O Savior of those who seek refuge from their adversaries at your right hand. As for me, I shall behold your face in righteousness. When I awake, I shall be satisfied, beholding your likeness.
I will call upon the Lord, who is worthy to be praised. So shall I be saved from my enemies. I will call upon the Lord. The Lord liveth, and blessed be the rock, and let the God of my salvation be exalted. The Lord liveth, and blessed be the rock, and let the God of my salvation be exalted.
I invite you to contemplate on the mysterious but constant and steadfast nature of God as the Cindy Klein Memorial Handbell Choir shares this piece, Immortal Invisible.
Our scripture reading today comes to us from Genesis chapter 37, verses 1 through 4 and 12 through 28. We're reading from the New Revised Standard Version. Jacob settled in the land where his father had lived as an alien, the land of Canaan. This is the story of the family of Jacob. Joseph, being 17 years old, was shepherding the flock with his brothers. He was a helper to the sons of Bilhah and Zilpah, his father's wives. And Joseph brought a bad report of them to their father. Now Israel loved Joseph more than any other of his children, because he was the son of his old age, and he had made him a long robe with sleeves. But when his brothers saw that their father loved him more than all his brothers, they hated him and could not speak peaceably to him.
Now his brothers went to pasture their father's flocks near Shechem. And Israel said to Joseph, "Are not your brothers pasturing the flock at Shechem? Come, I will send you to them." He answered, "Here I am." So I said to him, "Go now, see if it is well with your brothers and with the flock, and bring word back to me." So he sent him from the valley of Hebron. He came to Shechem, and a man found him wandering in the fields. The man asked him, "What are you seeking?" "I'm seeking my brothers," he said. "Tell me, please, where are they pasturing the flock?" The man said, "They have gone away, for I heard them say, 'Let's go to Dothan.'" So Joseph went after his brothers and found them at Dothan. And they saw him from a distance. And before he came near them, they conspired to kill him. And they said to one another, "Here comes this dreamer. Come now, let's kill him and throw him into one of the pits. And then we shall say that a wild animal has devoured him. And we shall see what will become of his dreams." But when Reuben heard it, he delivered him out of their hands, saying, "Let us not take his life." Reuben said to them, "Shed no blood. Throw him into this pit here in the wilderness, but lay no hand on him, that he might rescue him out of their hand and restore him to his father." So when Joseph came to his brothers, they stripped him of his robe, the long robe with sleeves that he wore. They took him and threw him into a pit. The pit was empty, and there was no water in it.
Then they sat down to eat, and looking up they saw a caravan of Ishmaelites coming from Gilead, with their camels carrying gum, balm, and resin, on their way to carry it down to Egypt. Then Judah said to his brothers, "What profit is it if we kill our brother and conceal his blood? Come, let us sell him to the Ishmaelites and not lay our hands on him, for he is our brother, our own flesh." And his brothers agreed. When some Midianite traders passed by, they drew Joseph up, lifting him out of the pit, and sold him to the Ishmaelites for 20 pieces of silver. And they took Joseph to Egypt.
The word of God for the people of God.
Have you ever had one of those moments in your life that you later wish you could go back and change? I think it's safe to say most of us have had several. Sometimes you know right away you made a mistake. Accidentally hitting send all on that email you meant to be private, carrying too many things, dropping everything, and making a big mess. Sometimes you know right away. But other times the revelation takes a lot longer. Maybe you spend years in a bad job before realizing you should have made a different career choice. Or maybe you suffer multiple car breakdowns before wishing you had gone with the other manufacturer. We've all been there. And how often do we think if we could just go back in time and undo that one thing or make that other choice or stop ourselves or someone else maybe from doing something, how different everything could have been. It's no wonder that time travel books and movies are so popular then. I'm a big fan. They're usually pretty entertaining and a bit mind-bending, might make you think hard about how things could play out or about paradoxes or lack thereof. They ask a question about just what would happen if you could go back and change something. They might make you wonder, if you could change one thing, what would it be? Just to name one I've read, There's a Stephen King novel and later TV adaptation called 11/22/63, and it's about a man who finds a time portal and, no surprise, decides that if he goes back in time, he could make the nation or even the world a better place if he were to stop something that happened on November 22nd, 1963, the assassination of President Kennedy. He's convinced that everything would just be so much better had that presidency gone on uninterrupted and not cut short. Another one people won't be surprised that I'm familiar with is a time travel story that takes place within the Harry Potter series, Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban. In this book, Harry and Hermione use a time turner, a necklace that can turn back time by a few hours to try to save the life of an innocent man. Time travel stories, they raise an intriguing question. If you could go back in time and change that one thing in your personal life or maybe even a world event, what would it be and what impact would it have? The Atlantic magazine from November 2019 asked this question of some university professors. Duke professor Sandy Darity said, "I wish that radical Reconstruction had been made a reality after the end of the Civil War. If this had happened, former slaves would have enjoyed full political participation along with control over the schooling of their children, protected by the Union Army and land grants for 40 acres of farming." We can see the ramifications of that not having happened even in society today. Marina Warner of the University of London wishes that Ferdinand and Isabella had torn up the Alhambra Decree, which drove all Jews out of Spanish territories. History would look very different, she says, if the coexistence of Jews, Muslims, and Christians had continued in 1492. Indeed, what would America look like now? Rutgers professor Samantha Kelly has a suggestion that will surprise you. She wishes that agriculture had never been invented. You heard me right, agriculture. There would be far less environmental degradation and income inequality, she says. A world without industrial agriculture would pretty much be the Eden of the Bible. So Kelly wants to go back in time to the Garden of Eden. Not sure about that one, but I suppose it has its merits. How about you? What changes would you make? A lot of people think about preventing the assassination of presidents, as I mentioned, Kennedy or Lincoln or someone else, possibly overthrowing Adolf Hitler before the Second World War could even begin, or going back further, maybe things like saving Jesus from the agony of the cross. In the book of Genesis, we have a story play out where many people could have looked at it and said, oh, if only I had done this differently. Oh, if only that part hadn't happened. We hear about Jacob settling in the land of Canaan and about his 12 sons, one of whom is named Joseph. We hear that Jacob loved Joseph more than any other of his children because he was the son of his old age. And Jacob made him a robe with long sleeves. Not something I like thinking about right now in Yuma's record-breaking temperatures, but it was very nice at the time. Something called a coat of many colors. Yes, the Technicolor Dreamcoat of musical fame. You can just imagine how his brothers liked seeing the youngest treated and singled out like that. They hated him and could not speak peaceably to him. We see that in families even today, so we can imagine it then when there's 12 competing for the attention of their parents, of their father. In addition, we're told that Joseph was a dreamer, and one of his dreams contained the message that his brothers would bow down to him, and he dared to share this message out loud with them. No wonder they didn't have much use for him. When they heard this, they hated him even more because of his dreams and his words, we're told. So if you could go back in time and change something, you might say to Jacob, don't play favorites with Joseph like that. It just singles him out so his brothers hate him. Or you might say to Joseph, just keep that dream to yourself. It might not really win you any friends. At age 17, Joseph was shepherding the flock with his brothers, acting as a helper. There were 4 of them misbehaving in the field, so Joseph brought a bad report of them to their father, threw them under the bus. Now, we know siblings might like to do that a lot. How often do we tell our kids now, don't be a tattletale? Maybe we would want to go back and say that to Joseph. But sure enough, the situation went from bad to worse when Joseph was sent to check on his brothers as they pastured the flock. Joseph went after them and yet again found them at a place called Dothan. His brothers saw him from a distance, and before he came near him, they conspired to kill him. That's taking it pretty far. We all see sibling rivalry, and sometimes we even joke about how far it could go. When my sons Leonard and John were teenagers, my husband and I would listen to all the schemes and plots they came up with and the discussions and arguments they had with each other. And we'd say, you know, if those two smart boys put their heads together when they're adults, they could probably cure cancer. Well, I said that, and then my husband said, yeah, or invent a worse one, to which I added, to use on each other. But that's the joke, is that sometimes with siblings, another definition can be people you either plan to murder or plan a murder with. There's no middle ground. Well, that's the sort of rivalry taken to that extreme level that's described in Genesis, for real. The brothers said to one another, here comes this dreamer. Come now, let's kill him and throw him into one of the pits. We shall say that a wild animal has devoured him, and we shall see what becomes of his dreams. Wow. Well, we can hope that maybe they were speaking in hyperbole, or the author of Genesis was. But they said that, and you think back to them, oh, don't do that. If you could employ that necklace that Harry Potter and Hermione used, a time turner, you might go back and say to the brothers, don't do that. You'll never get away with murder. How do you think Joseph's going to react to that? Just wait till your father finds out. Fortunately, the eldest brother, Reuben, was not speaking quite the same as the others. He talked some sense into the younger ones. Let's not actually kill him, he says. Don't shed his blood. Let's just put him in this pit here in the wilderness, just kind of hide him for a while, but not really hurt him. Reuben planned to rescue him later and return him to his father, but maybe he was even hoping that Joseph would get a good scare and learn a lesson in the process. Give him credit. He made a better decision than his brothers, right in the middle of this tragic tale of favoritism. Turned down the bloodlust a notch to just a prank, if even a mean one. Well, Joseph did indeed come to his brothers, and they weren't having it. You can just imagine the bullies in the playground stripping of his robe and throwing him in the empty pit. That's what they did. Then after all that, well, all that exertion, they were hungry. They didn't care about their brother. Let him miss a meal. They sat down and ate their meal. But as they were eating, they see a caravan of Ishmaelites coming from Gilead, carrying precious cargo to Egypt. Well, it turns out they're pretty malicious after all. Maybe all this talk wasn't just hyperbole, because as they're eating, another of the brothers, Judah, says, what does it help us if we kill him? What's it going to do for us? How about if we sell him to this band of Ishmaelites? Not hurt him. After all, he is our brother. We don't want him dead. We don't want his blood on our hands. But maybe we can sell him off and be rid of him. There's the end of our problems. And so they actually did this. They pulled Joseph out of the pit and sell him for 20 pieces of silver. The trading travelers take Joseph to Egypt. They really did it. They really went through with it. Wow. If you had a portal and could step back centuries, would you say to those brothers, you know, maybe selling your own brother off isn't such a great idea? Maybe you're mad at him now. Maybe you're tired of his tattling and the favoritism. But someday might you come to regret this? What is it going to do to your father? So the story of Joseph might make us want to go back in time and make changes. Perhaps the situation made them want to make changes. No doubt one or the others of the brothers regretted it over the years. No doubt the father perhaps was sorry that he hadn't fostered a better relationship. Why not? Many of us can think of more positive choices that we could make to improve history or change the world. Most of us can think of changes we'd make in our own life if we could go back, make things simpler for ourselves, better for our own families. But we should never forget that God is always working toward a surprising conclusion, even when humans are acting in horrible ways. In the book of Genesis, Joseph was sold as a servant to Potiphar, one of Pharaoh's officials. How would Jacob have reacted to that? So that seems like a really bad thing, sold into slavery. But the story goes on. Joseph found favor in Potiphar's sight and was put in charge of the house. That's a pretty prestigious and important job. So maybe things were turning around. Maybe life wasn't quite so bad for Joseph. Put the time turner away, Hermione. Harry's got it. But then Potiphar's wife saw Joseph working, decided that he was a pretty fine catch, and tried to seduce him. When Joseph refused to be enticed, Potiphar's wife accused him of sexual misconduct, and he was thrown into the prison. They believed her, not him. Accused because he didn't do what she wanted. It would seem like sexual harassment on the job has been a problem for millennia, huh? But that wasn't the end for Joseph either. Things seemed to be bad, but once again, they turned around. God showed love to Joseph and gave him favor in the sight of the chief jailer. So that's a good thing. Once again, God made something good happen for Joseph. While in prison, Joseph became an interpreter of dreams. His childhood ability, having wisdom into his own dreams, was now turned into something that gave him a way to see into the minds of others, to predict what events might happen or what problems were perturbing people based on what they dreamed about. So he offered insight into the dreams of Pharaoh himself. Because of his ability to do that, he was eventually released from prison, and he rose, becoming the second in command to Pharaoh himself of all of Egypt. So once again, Joseph's fortunes turn around, and he's in a very powerful position as a result of the long and very difficult road he traveled, quite unpredictably. But isn't it amazing what God did with that situation? Eventually, though, things aren't going so well for all of the region. Israel, Egypt, other countries as well. A famine struck everything, and so people came from many countries around to buy bread from Egypt. It would seem that part of the work that Pharaoh did and Joseph as the second in command helped make Egypt prosperous so that they had bread that other lands could buy to survive on. Bad things, good things, bad things, good things. Clearly, God is always working toward a surprising conclusion, even when humans are busy misbehaving. Looking at all the things that happened in Joseph's life, how would you decide where to interrupt the change of events? Maybe if Joseph had stayed with his family, he would never have gone to Egypt. The famine would have struck. Egypt wouldn't have been as prosperous, and maybe nobody would have had anywhere to go buy bread. There were further developments. Among the hungry people coming from Egypt for bread were Joseph's brothers. At first, Joseph did not reveal his identity and treated them harshly. Can't say I blame him, do you? But eventually, taking pity on them, he agreed to help them and said, even though you intended to do me harm, God intended it for good in order to preserve a numerous people. At the end of the story, Joseph forgives his brothers and provides for them as God wanted him to do. You intended to do harm to me, says Joseph, naming clearly that his brothers did a great evil to him. But knowing that God is always working toward a surprising conclusion, he points out what we can now see in retrospect. God used the situation for good in order to preserve a number of people. In every time and place and situation, God is working the purpose out. Sometimes we humans cooperate with these purposes. Sometimes we don't. But nothing deters God in the work of saving people from destruction. Even the bad things that we would like to change in world history and our own personal histories, those things can foster good things. Those things can be transformed into good. God is not responsible for the evil people do. Don't think for a minute I'm saying that. History just shows that God can turn bad things into good. I'm not necessarily saying for a minute that Joseph was supposed to be turned into the Ishmaelites by his brothers. I'm not saying God wanted them to throw him into that pit. People break God's will, God's best hopes and dreams for our future all of the time. The term sin, missing the mark, falling short of God's best for us, is a common term, a common concept for a reason. Now, there's an aphorism that people quote that everything happens for a reason. And I would agree, but I don't agree with it the way that some people mean it. I would argue that, okay, everything happens for a reason. And sometimes, yes, that reason is as good and pure and direct, straightforward as it would seem. Somebody gives a gift to charity and it gets used for good. That happened for a reason. Somebody experiences a great windfall in a new job and provide better for their family and go on to be a better and stronger person. That happened for a reason we can understand. But sometimes the things that happen aren't great, and in fact, they might be neutral or negative. The same laws of nature, of physics that keep our world spinning and our bodies functioning, for example, those reasons can also lead to disasters. Hurricanes, earthquakes, physical illness. It's just part of the balance of what's needed to keep the universe running, is sometimes it doesn't go in the best direction. And let's be honest, some of the things that happen for just plain frustrating or stupid or awful reasons. For example, somebody decides to text and drive, and it leads to an accident where people are injured or worse. Everything happens for a reason, but all too often those reasons can be frustrating, infuriating, or, like I said, just plain stupid. But God can always work with the results. No matter what the outcome, God always seems to find a way to surprise us with something positive that develops later. God did it with Joseph and his brothers. God did it with Jesus on the cross. God did it with Paul, who moved from being a persecutor of the church to an apostle to the Gentiles. Nothing is wasted with God. When Joseph's brothers sold him into slavery, they set the stage for his rise in Egypt. When Jesus died and was buried, he was put in the right place for a resurrection. The zeal of Saul the persecutor changed into the passion of Paul the apostle. Each of us has committed sins, suffered defeats, made terrible mistakes, and been treated terribly. We might want to jump into a time machine or grab a time turner and change the past. But even in fiction, where it possibly can happen, it never seems to work. That Stephen King novel I mentioned, the protagonist discovers that the world in which Kennedy survived is much worse. He finds it in ruins, even worse than our COVID world today, believe it or not, somehow turned this way by subsequent events after Kennedy's presidency. So the protagonist ends up deciding to go back in time again and put it back the way he found it. As for the Harry Potter story, well, it may seem like Harry and Hermione were successful. The innocent man, after all, does have his life saved. But it turns out that time travel in that story is explained in such a way that all of it was meant to happen all that way the whole time. Harry and Hermione didn't really change anything. They just took part in the events as they happened, from both perspectives. So nothing was really changed. The past just played an important part in what made the present good. And that's important for us to remember. We are a part of the past, and we particularly of our own stories. Of course, we're part of that past, and they're part of us. We can't change them. What's happened has happened. But like Harry and Hermione, we can come to see how good was actually happening all along in our past. How, although there may have been plenty of things that we didn't want to happen, things that are miserable, there are lessons that can be learned, changes that can be made as a result, ways that God can still create good in the world through the things that happened in the past. We can look at our past through a lens that doesn't pretend the bad didn't happen, but sees the good that God can still make happen. God is always at work in all our lives, turning evil into good. Since nothing is wasted with God, there's no point trying to change history. Instead, let's trust God to transform our future.
Surely the presence of the Lord is in this place. I can feel his mighty power and his grace. I can hear the brush of angels' wings. I see glory on each face. Surely the presence of the Lord is in this place.
Here now are community joys and concerns. For Jackson, Joe, and Darlene R's grandson, who was to have all 4 wisdom teeth removed, please pray for a quick recovery. Arlene C., now home from the hospital. Please pray for continued recovery for Arlene and strength for daughter Connie C. and other caregivers. Tim and Ashley, Jean R.'s daughter and granddaughter. Please keep both in your prayers as they both learn to be a team to deal with difficult situations. Marcia, Anna Marie S.'s friend, who was to have surgery. Prayers please for a good recovery. Clint as he waits for his pending surgery, and for Patty as she waits with him. Guidance for the medical team. Educational staffs at all the local schools as they prepare to open and or are already providing distant learning experiences. Keep them all safe and healthy. Praise for all who contributed to the Palmcroft teacher gifts and were there to drive by Thursday morning. Jim and Shirley T., safe travels as they head west. Answered prayers, they were negative for COVID-19. Neil, Patty's brother, answered prayers as he is getting stronger every day. Joshua, Patty's grandson, is also doing well. Prayers of hope and support for all those waiting for people in Washington, D.C. to come together to provide continued support for those who continue to be laid off, are unable to pay bills, or are facing eviction. Pam Y.W., prayers of comfort and peace of spirit as she goes in for additional procedures. Pastor Bob as he works to finish up his coursework. prayers of guidance and clear thinking. Prayers for all impacted by the explosions in Beirut, for those impacted by Hurricane Isaias, flooding and tornadoes, and for those impacted by the Apple Fire in Southern California, those in its path and those fighting it. For Debbie, bell choir member, as she starts her radiation, prayers of healing and comfort for her and for Forrest as he provides her with support. Pete N., continued prayers of healing, prayers of comfort and strength for Verna as she continues to provide love and support. For Tyler and the rural metro team who are continuing to provide COVID-19 support in Texas, prayers that they may be safe and healthy. Sharon F., who had not been feeling well. She has been placed on antibiotics with some improvement, but please pray for continued healing. In your love, Lord, hear our prayers.
We give you all thanks and praise, O God, for you offer us the banquet that feeds us abundantly and fills us with your presence. You strove against the gloom, the disorder, and you prevailed, bringing forth creation in all its miraculous abundance. You challenged your servant Jacob face to face and gave him your blessing and promise. From his family you formed your covenant people, in whom your glory, your law, and your worship were revealed to this world.
But now, in these last days, your Messiah Jesus has emerged from among them, bringing your compassion and healing to all. Though he was cursed and cut off for the sake of his people, you raised him from death. Now in him, you fill our greatest needs. And it is in holding tight to him that we see your face and receive your blessing.
Therefore, with our hearts lifted high, we offer you thanks and praise at all times through Jesus Christ our Lord, who lives and reigns with you and the Holy Spirit, one God, forever and ever. Amen.
And now, with the confidence of the children of God, let us pray as Jesus taught us. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory forever. Amen.
As God has showered abundant love and grace on us, may we share gifts of love and grace with God's world. So with gratitude in our hearts for all that we have received, we come to this time of offering. As we receive our offering, you will see on the screen ways in which you can give to support both Trinity and Fort Yuma United Methodist Churches. May we give with joy in our hearts.
being with us on this joyful day. We remind you that we have a midweek fellowship opportunity on Wednesday mornings at 10, Coffee with Karen. This Zoom meeting is a chance to connect or reconnect with members of the Trinity family and share your joys and concerns or just some friendly words. Please contact the church office for information on how to join in. We are also happy to share another upcoming fellowship opportunity, Virtual Sunday Morning Fellowship Hour, beginning August 23rd. The plan is to offer a Zoom meeting Sunday mornings at 11 a.m. so that we can greet one another, share our thoughts, and spend time together in conversation directly after worship, much like we do when we're gathering in person. Watch for more information on how to participate in the coming weeks. Please plan to join us. Lastly, I'd remind you that while the church office is physically open only by appointment, we are answering phones and emails remotely. Virtual office hours are Monday through Thursday, 9 a.m. to noon. However, you can leave a phone message or send us an email with your questions or prayer requests, and we will happily get back to you. You can also check out announcements for Trinity, as well as sign up for email updates and the prayer chain on our website, trinityuma.org. Also, please watch for upcoming information on virtual Zoom office hours with Pastor Bob. Following the benediction, the closing hymn is Be Thou My Vision. Please join in as you are comfortable. Christ our Lord is indeed our vision. Receive now the benediction. As we go from here, hear again the promises of God made long ago to our ancestor Jacob, and still true for us today. I am the Lord your God, the God of Abraham and Isaac. Know that I am with you and will keep you wherever you go. I will not leave you until I have done everything that I have promised. Let's go from here in the assurance that our faithful God goes with us.
Be thou my vision, O Lord of my heart, not be all else to me, save that thou art. Thou my best thought, by day or by night, waking or sleeping, thy presence my light. Be thou